Okay, we got our short block here. We did exchange the cylinders and the crankcase for a short block here. Comes with all the gaskets here and stuff. So let's get unboxing this and start putting her together. Well, there she is. Looking pretty. Looking really nice. I did get the durability kit on this, which is a spacer on the bottom of the cylinders and slightly different pistons. So the stroke stays exactly the same rods, same crank, everything. But this spacer here allows for a slightly taller piston, which takes a little bit of the slap out of it and will allow this top end to run even longer. So alrighty, let's get to it. We got our gaskets here ready to go. All of this needs to go back on. Flywheel, recoil, stator, heads. Probably start with that. Water pump, reeds. I do have a new set of reeds because one of these, if you look through it, that's much more light than I'd like to see. So a new set of reeds, oil pump, all that. Time to go back on this puppy. I do have the owner's manual here. This Bible of a book that I will be referring to heavily for torque specifications and all that good stuff as I put her back together. So this will be open on the side. For reference, it'll give us our torquing sequence for the head as well as how much to torque them down to. Give us the torque numbers for torque specs for water pump, housing, all that kind of good stuff on here. So I will be referring to this frequently. But anyway, here goes. So in order to put the flywheel on here and tighten this nut on to the end of the crankshaft, I'll just end up taking a little chunk of paracord, feeding it down through the spark plug hole here, and then using the ratchet to turn it over until that piston comes up and pinches that chunk of paracord onto the top of the head there. And that'll keep the crank from spinning and allow us to tighten this flywheel nut onto the end of the crank here, torque it right up, because it has to go to 90 foot-pounds of torque, so it takes quite a bit of pressure here. Well, there she be, ready to go back in. That actually went really smoothly. Had all the gaskets I needed in the kit. Got the oil pump back on there mounted up. The new reeds in there. Got the stator all plugged in. Everything went well there. The recoil does turn it over, which is a very good thing. And yeah, did consult this a lot to find all of our torque specs and sequences so that we did it in the correct sequence here. So, believe it or not, it's ready to start throwing this back in. Here goes. So the challenging thing here is just to get all the motor mounts lined up while making sure that you don't pinch an oil line or a coolant line or something like that. And then of course you got to make sure you start threading the motor mount bolts in by hand to make sure they're lined up. So yeah, it takes a little bit of fiddling back and forth, but this didn't go too bad. Now we're getting her tightened on there and ready to go on to the next thing. Basically start getting everything hooked up, plug everything in, and hook up the intake and the throttle body to the reed box there, and move on to the fuel lines, put the injector rail in there, and start getting everything connected here. Good progress. And of course, don't forget to put new injector seals in there. You just gotta feed them in square into the little injector ports in the back of the cylinder, and then just start really carefully inserting the injectors into those ports, getting the bolts lined up, and snugging them down. Those just get torqued down to 9 foot-pounds. So once you got them lined up, it doesn't take much, and you got the fuel side pretty much figured out. Onto the Y pipe here. This can be really challenging to get all these bolts put in here and torqued up once the engine is in. And you can put this on before you install the engine, and it'll be a lot easier to put the Y pipe on, but that much more of a struggle to get the engine in. So it's 6 one way, half a dozen the other. I chose to just put the engine in without it, and then fight it through getting all these bolts put on and torqued down here. Now it's time for the exhaust valves to go back in. There's new springs on there and a new gasket around each one. So slide that in there. As you notice, the steering post is loose there so that we can fit that past the steering post. And we'll get these all started and then we'll torque them in sequence. Okay, so unfortunately my phone died there, so you missed a few little details there. You see we got the seat on there and got the air box put on as well. We're just topping it up with some fresh gas because the tank was empty. Of course, I drained that in case there was water in there from the last time. And then, of course, bleed the coolant out of the top of the thermostat here and get the hood plugged in and just about ready to see if she wants to fire up here. We got her started up, didn't want to start, so we had to pull the spark plugs out, put a little cap full of gas in the top of each cylinder, and then off she went. Seems happy. We got her topped up with coolant there. We did loosen off this little nut here on the top of the thermostat. You can see a little coolant there right now. And bleed that out. We'll do that again once it cools off. And then for the next little bit here, we just kept her idling. We used the light and checked from every angle, up, down, and around. Made sure all our connections seemed tight. No fuel leaks, no coolant leaks. Make sure everything looked all right there. It is running, idling a little bit low. So TPS is probably off a little bit there. But first thing in the morning, we'll be taking her to dealership. They'll plug it into digital wrench there. Reset the TPS, make sure that's good. They'll relearn the exhaust valves to make sure that's within parameters. And other than that, she should be mint, good to go. We'll get that plugged in and checked at the dealership, like I said, and then head to the mountains and start breaking her in.